After 10 years of living in their home, maintaining their garden, using their driveway every single day, a California family discovered that nearly 1,000 square feet of what they thought was their property actually belonged to their neighbor. Their new neighbor commissioned a survey, found the encroachment, and planned to build a fence that would come within 2 feet of their front door. What happened next in court surprised everyone, including the lawyers. This is a real property line dispute that went all the way to a California Court of Appeals, and the outcome changed how property boundary law works in California forever. Welcome back to Plain Verdict. Let's get into it. In our last video, we covered what the law says when your neighbor builds a fence on your property. Today we're going deeper, into a real court case that illustrates exactly how these disputes play out when they go all the way to trial. The case is Goodhart versus Honeybadger Acquisitions, decided by a California Court of Appeals in 2023. And it raises a question that will make every homeowner think twice. What happens when you've been using land that isn't legally yours for over a decade? The setting is Tiburon, California, an affluent community in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. The Goodhart family had lived in their home for over 10 years. During that time, they maintained and improved approximately 950 square feet of land that they genuinely believed was part of their property. They landscaped it. They used part of it as their driveway. They maintained it as their front and rear yards. For 10 years, nobody questioned it. Nobody objected. And then a new owner bought the neighboring property and commissioned a survey. When the new owner, a company called Honeybadger Acquisitions, commissioned a professional survey in connection with their plans to build a perimeter fence, the results were unambiguous. The survey showed that approximately 950 square feet of land that the Goodharts had been using, maintaining, and improving for over a decade was not their property. It legally belonged to Honeybadger Acquisitions. Under a strict reading of property law, Honeybadger had every right to build their fence along the true property line. But here's where it gets complicated. Building that fence along the true legal boundary would place it within 2 feet of the Goodharts' driveway, their front steps, and the back of their house. The Goodharts would effectively lose access to a significant portion of their home's practical living space they had used and maintained for 10 years believing it was theirs. The Goodharts went to court. Their legal argument rested on a doctrine called an equitable easement, a legal concept that allows a court to grant someone the right to use another person's property when strict enforcement of the property boundary would create a deeply unfair outcome. To win an equitable easement, the Goodharts needed to prove 3 things. First, that their encroachment was innocent. They genuinely believed the land was theirs and had no intention of taking someone else's property. Second, that they would suffer significant harm if the fence was built on the true property line. Losing access to their driveway and having a fence within 2 feet of their front door is about as significant as harm gets. Third, that the harm to Honeybadger Acquisitions from granting the easement was relatively minor compared to the harm the Goodharts would suffer without it. This third element is where the case got really interesting. The California Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the Goodharts. Here's the reasoning that decided the case. The court found that the Goodharts' encroachment was entirely innocent. They genuinely believed the land was theirs and had acted in complete good faith for over 10 years. On the question of harm, the court made a striking comparison. The 950 square feet in dispute constituted less than 1% of Honeybadger Acquisitions' total property, and it was located downhill from their residence on undeveloped hillside land that was largely unusable to them. In contrast, the Goodharts would lose practical access to a significant portion of their home's living space, their driveway, their front steps, their yard. The court granted the Goodharts an equitable easement over the disputed area. This meant that despite not legally owning that 950 square feet, Honeybadger Acquisitions could not build a fence that would deny the Goodharts access to it. The legal owner of the land could not use it in a way that destroyed their neighbor's reasonable use of their home. The Goodhart case matters beyond just this one family's driveway for 2 important reasons. First, it confirmed that California courts will consider the practical fairness of a situation alongside strict legal property rights. Legal ownership is not always the final word in a property dispute. A court can grant rights over land you don't own if enforcing the strict legal boundary would cause disproportionate harm. Second, it clarified the law around implied easements and equitable remedies in California property disputes in a way that affects how these cases are argued and decided going forward. For ordinary homeowners, the message is both reassuring and cautionary. Reassuring because it shows courts are willing to consider practical reality and not just legal technicality. Cautionary because it illustrates exactly how complicated and expensive a property boundary dispute can become, and why preventing one through a professional survey before buying property or building anything near a boundary is always worth the cost. So what does the Goodhart case mean for you practically? 4 important lessons. Lesson 1, get a property survey before you buy. Had either party in this case obtained a current survey when purchasing their property, this dispute would likely never have happened. A survey typically costs $500 to $2,000, depending on your location and property size. The Goodhart litigation costs both sides exponentially more. Lesson 2. Know your boundaries before you build anything. Before installing a fence, driveway, landscaping, or any structure near your property line, get a survey to confirm exactly where that line is. Lesson 3. Address encroachments quickly. The Goodharts benefited from 10 years of good faith use. But adverse possession laws mean that in many states, a neighbor who encroaches on your land for long enough without objection can gain legal rights to it. Don't let years pass without addressing a known encroachment. Lesson 4, consider negotiation before litigation. Both sides in this case spent significant money on legal fees fighting over land worth a fraction of what the dispute cost. A negotiated easement agreement reached before going to court would have served everyone's interests far better. The Goodhart case is a reminder that property law isn't always as simple as who holds the deed. Courts are empowered to consider fairness, practical reality, and proportional harm alongside strict legal ownership. And sometimes the outcome surprises everyone. If you found this case as compelling as we did, subscribe to Plain Verdict. We cover a new legal concept or court case every week in plain language. And if you're dealing with a property boundary dispute right now, drop your situation in the comments. We read every single one.